How could you do this to me? Scarlett's voice trembled as she clutched the bank documents, her hands shaking with a mix of disbelief and fury. Across the room, her parents stood frozen, caught between guilt and defiance. Scarlett's world tilted on its axis when she discovered her parents had forged her signature to secure a $220,000 loan. The shocking truth was that the money wasn't for an emergency or even a life-altering cause, it was for her sister Melissa's extravagant dream wedding. A wedding Scarlett wasn't even invited to. How does one handle betrayal from the people they trust most? How does one process that their name and future were jeopardized without a second thought? The backstory. Scarlett, a 32-year-old graphic designer, had always believed in carving out her path. Her life was one of quiet determination, a blend of long hours in her home studio and meaningful moments spent with her close-knit circle of friends. Scarlett had worked tirelessly to build her reputation, steadily climbing the ladder in a competitive industry. Though not wealthy, she had managed her finances prudently, setting aside savings for her dream of one day opening her design firm. Her relationship with her family, however, was far more complicated. Scarlett's parents had always been overbearing when it came to her younger sister Melissa, who was treated as the golden child. While Scarlett had worked for everything she had, Melissa, at 27, was pampered and spoiled, her whims indulged with little thought to the consequences. Scarlett had tried to remain unaffected, shrugging off her parents' favoritism as best as she could, but the deep-rooted imbalance had always lingered. Melissa, a social media influencer, had lived her life basking in the glow of validation from strangers and family alike. Her latest demand was for a wedding so lavish it rivaled the celebrity events she frequently posted about. While Scarlett quietly wished her sister happiness, she felt no personal connection to the planning or the event itself. Over the years, Scarlett and Melissa's relationship had grown distant, with Melissa viewing Scarlett as too simple and Scarlett perceiving her sister as shallow and self-absorbed. Scarlett's parents had tried to keep her in the loop about family events, though she had long been resigned to her peripheral role. Still, when the wedding planning began, she found it odd that no one had reached out to ask if she would attend. She assumed she'd receive an invitation eventually, though the lack of contact stung more than she cared to admit. It wasn't until she received a call from her bank one afternoon that Scarlett's world began to unravel. The representative asked for confirmation on a $220,000 loan application in her name. Scarlett's pulse quickened as she assured the bank that she had made no such application. There must be a mistake, she insisted, but as she reviewed the documents the bank sent her, her heart sank. Her name was scrawled at the bottom of the papers, her signature forged. Panic gave way to fury as Scarlett confronted her parents, the only people who could have accessed her personal information. At first, they tried to deny it, but their guilt was as obvious as the truth itself. They admitted to taking out the loan in her name, justifying it as a necessary sacrifice for Melissa's happiness. "It's her dream wedding," her mother argued, "and you're her sister. Isn't it natural to help family?" Her father added, "We didn't think you'd mind. We planned to pay it back." Scarlett's world tilted as the weight of their betrayal settled over her. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust. Her dreams of starting her own business now felt precariously close to slipping away. To make matters worse, Melissa had been oblivious to the arrangement, living in blissful ignorance while her parents jeopardized Scarlett's future for her sake. The final blow came when Scarlett learned that Melissa's fiancé, Kevin, and his family had refused to contribute more than a modest sum to the wedding, insisting on setting financial boundaries. Yet her parents hadn't hesitated to cross lines that no one else dared to. To Scarlett, their actions spoke volumes. Melissa's desires were worth more than her sister's autonomy. Scarlett struggled to navigate the emotional storm within her. On one hand, she wanted to cut ties completely, but on the other, she feared how such a drastic move might ripple through her life. Her lawyer assured her that the bank could likely resolve the issue with proof of forgery, but the damage went deeper than legalities. Sitting in her studio one night, her mind raced. Scarlet thought of everything she had worked for, everything she still wanted to achieve. She refused to let this betrayal define her. If her parents and Melissa had gambled with her future, she would do everything in her power to regain control. The road ahead would be fraught with difficult conversations, legal battles, and severed relationships, but Scarlet was ready. For the first time in years, she felt a new fire burning within her. It wasn't just about protecting herself anymore, it was about reclaiming her agency, setting boundaries, and teaching those who had underestimated her just how strong she could be. The inciting incident. Scarlet's day began like any other. She was in her studio, immersed in a complex design project, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her bank's name, and she frowned. She hadn't scheduled any calls with them. Setting her stylus down, she answered, her tone polite but distracted. "Miss Scarlett Thompson?" the representative asked. "Yes, this is Scarlett," she replied, her mind still half focused on the layout she was perfecting. "We're calling to confirm the details of your recent $220,000 loan application," the voice said. Scarlett froze, her mind going blank. "I think there's been a mistake. I haven't applied for any loan," she said, her voice laced with confusion. "We have the signed documents here," the representative said, their tone calm but firm. "Would you like us to send over the scanned copies for your review?" "Yes, please," Scarlett managed, her stomach twisting into knots. The email arrived within minutes. As she opened the attachments, her breath caught. There it was, her name, her signature, her information, all on a loan application she had never seen before. The edges of her vision blurred as disbelief turned to panic. Someone had forged her signature, and she had no idea who or why. After taking a moment to steady herself, Scarlett called the bank back. She demanded a full review of the loan's processing and reported the forgery. The representative assured her that an investigation would be launched, but Scarlett knew the process would take time. Time she wasn't sure she had. She immediately thought of her parents. They were the only ones who could have accessed her personal information. Scarlett's relationship with her family had been fraught for years, but this crossed a line she never thought they'd breach. Trying to keep her voice steady, she called her mother. "Hi, Mom," Scarlett said, struggling to sound calm. "I need to ask you something, and I'm hoping there's a reasonable explanation. Did you or Dad take out a loan in my name?" There was a pause, and Scarlett could hear her mother's breathing on the other end. It was sharp and shallow, a dead giveaway. "Why would you ask something like that?" her mother finally said, her tone defensive. "Because the bank just sent me a loan application with my forged signature," Scarlett snapped, her patience unraveling. "Don't lie to me, Mom. Did you do this?" Her mother sighed heavily. "It wasn't meant to hurt you, Scarlett. It's for Melissa. Her wedding is next month, and there just wasn't enough money to cover everything she wanted." Scarlett's heart sank as the truth came crashing down. "You forged my signature for Melissa's wedding," she repeated, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about money, Mom. This could ruin me." Her mother tried to justify the betrayal. "Melissa's our youngest, Scarlett. It's her big day, and she's always dreamed of this wedding. We thought we'd pay it back before you even noticed. Family helps family, doesn't it?" Scarlett's head spun as her mother's words sank in. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the gravity of their actions. Instead, there was only a misplaced sense of entitlement. "So you jeopardized my future for her wedding?" Scarlett said, her voice trembling with anger. "Did you even plan to tell me? Or was I supposed to find out when the bank came after me for missing payments?" Her mother remained silent. Scarlett's father's voice then cut through the phone, stern and defensive. You're overreacting. It's just a loan, Scarlet. We're family. We thought you'd understand. Understand? Scarlet spat. Understand that you've stolen my identity and ruined my credit? For a wedding I wasn't even invited to? Her father faltered. Well, we didn't think you'd care about being there, given how distant you've been. That was the final blow. Scarlet hung up, unable to listen to any more excuses. Her hands shook as she stared at the phone, rage and betrayal boiling inside her. How could her parents do this to her? She felt like a stranger in her own family. That night, Scarlet sat in her studio, surrounded by sketches and designs that now seemed insignificant. She knew she had to act quickly, not just to undo the financial damage, but to reclaim her life. She contacted a lawyer and began the process of disputing the loan with the bank. She also drafted a message to Melissa, demanding answers. Did her sister know about the loan? Or was she as oblivious as Scarlet had once been? As Scarlet pressed send, a wave of determination swept over her. She refused to be a victim. If her family had chosen to gamble with her future, she would make sure they faced the consequences. This wasn't just about protecting her credit, it was about standing up for herself and ensuring that her voice, her value, was no longer overlooked. Scarlet's decision to confront the betrayal head-on set a chain of events in motion that would test her resolve, challenge her relationships, and ultimately force her to redefine her sense of family and self-worth. The first step was taking legal action, a process that proved both empowering and emotionally draining. Scarlet's lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, assured her that the bank's investigation into the forged loan documents would work in her favor. The evidence is on your side, Evelyn said during their first meeting. But you'll need to brace yourself. These cases can get messy, especially when family is involved. Messy was an understatement. Scarlet's parents' reaction to the legal notice she sent them was explosive. Her mother's teary phone calls came first, followed by her father's angry messages accusing her of tearing the family apart. "You're turning your back on us for something so trivial," one text read. "This could have been handled privately. You didn't need to involve lawyers." Privately? Scarlet thought bitterly. They hadn't given her the courtesy of handling anything privately when they forged her signature. The hypocrisy stung, but she refused to back down. For the first time in her life, she prioritized her well-being over the needs and desires of her family. The situation escalated further when Melissa finally reached out. Scarlet's sister had been silent in the weeks following the revelation, but now she called, her tone dripping with disdain. "I can't believe you're doing this," Melissa said without preamble. "Do you even realize the position you're putting Mom and Dad in? They're stressed out of their minds because of you." Scarlet took a deep breath, her grip tightening on her phone. "Melissa, did you know about the loan?" she asked, her voice steady but cold. There was a pause, and then Melissa replied, "Not at first. But they told me eventually. They did it because they loved me and wanted me to have my dream wedding. It's not like they did it to hurt you." Scarlet's chest tightened. "Do you even hear yourself?" she snapped. "They risked my financial future for a party. And you think that's okay because it's your dream?" Melissa's voice turned defensive. "It's not just a party. It's my wedding. And for the record, if you weren't so selfish, you'd understand that family sacrifices for each other." "Sacrifices?" Scarlet said, her voice rising. "I've sacrificed plenty for this family. What have you ever given up?" The call ended with Melissa hanging up, leaving Scarlet feeling angrier and lonelier than ever. The conflict drove a deeper wedge between her and her family, but it also strengthened her resolve. If they couldn't understand the gravity of their actions, then they didn't deserve her understanding in return. As the weeks passed, Scarlet threw herself into her work. Designing became both an escape and a weapon, her projects were sharper, more ambitious, and more personal than ever before. The betrayal fueled her creativity in ways she hadn't expected. She also began networking more aggressively, attending industry events, and meeting potential collaborators for her future design firm. However, the fallout from the loan continued to disrupt her life. Gossip spread through their extended family, many of whom sided with her parents. Scarlet's aunts and uncles called her cold and ungrateful, while cousins whispered that she was being unnecessarily dramatic. Every family gathering became a battlefield of side glances and whispered judgments, forcing Scarlet to weigh the cost of staying connected to people who saw her as the villain. In a moment of desperation, Scarlet decided to contact Kevin, Melissa's fiancé. She didn't know him well, but she hoped he could be a voice of reason. When they met at a quiet cafe, Kevin seemed tense but willing to listen. "I'm sorry to drag you into this," Scarlet began, sliding the bank documents across the table. "But you deserve to know the truth about how this wedding is being paid for." Kevin scanned the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "They forged your signature?" he asked, his voice low but incredulous. Scarlet nodded. "And they expect me to accept it because it's for Melissa." Kevin leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. "I knew they were struggling with the costs, but I didn't know it had gotten this out of hand. My parents set clear boundaries about what they'd contribute, and I thought your parents had done the same." "They didn't," Scarlet said bitterly. "They gambled with my future instead." Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This changes things. I need to talk to Melissa about this." A few days later, Scarlet received a call from her sister, furious. "You told Kevin?" Melissa yelled. "Do you have any idea what you've done? He's talking about canceling the wedding." "Good," Scarlet shot back. "Maybe he'll realize what kind of family he's marrying into." Melissa's voice broke. "You've ruined everything," she sobbed before hanging up. Scarlet felt a pang of guilt, but she reminded herself that the truth needed to come out. If Kevin couldn't handle the reality of Melissa and their parents' actions, then maybe it was better he found out now rather than later. The turning point came when the bank concluded its investigation. The forgery was confirmed, and Scarlet was cleared of any responsibility for the loan. The relief was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. Her relationship with her parents and sister was in shambles, and she wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. Shortly after, Scarlet received an unexpected call from Kevin. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, "for telling me the truth. Melissa and I decided to postpone the wedding. There's a lot we need to figure out before we move forward." Scarlet felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the chaos had sparked some overdue reflection for her sister and her fiancé. With the legal and financial fallout behind her, Scarlet began to focus on rebuilding. She cut ties with toxic family members and doubled down on her plans to start her design firm. It wasn't easy, but with every step forward, she felt stronger. She had learned the hard way that sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing alone, but it also means standing tall. Scarlet's journey to reclaim her life culminated in a moment that tested every ounce of her strength, resilience, and resolve. After weeks of legal battles, emotional confrontations, and fractured relationships, she finally reached a breaking point. It was time to confront her family one last time and demand accountability. The setting was her parents' home, a place that once symbolized love and stability but now felt more like a battlefield. Scarlet had been invited, albeit reluctantly, for a family meeting. She suspected her parents and sister had ulterior motives, likely a last-ditch attempt to guilt her into dropping the matter and reconciling. But Scarlet had come prepared. Armed with evidence, clarity, and a newfound sense of self-worth, she was ready to take control. As Scarlet walked through the familiar door, her mother greeted her with a strained smile. Her father's expression was colder, while Melissa's face was a mixture of guilt and defiance. They had gathered in the living room, a tense silence hanging in the air as Scarlet took her seat. "Thank you for coming," her mother began, her voice overly sweet. "We're hoping we can put all this behind us and move forward as a family." Scarlet's jaw tightened. "Put this behind us? You forged my signature, jeopardized my future, and put me in a position where I had to fight for my financial independence. You don't just get to sweep that under the rug." Her father's voice cut in, sharp and defensive. "We've already apologized, Scarlet. What more do you want? Do you know how much stress this has caused us?" Scarlet's eyes narrowed. "Stress? You forged a $220,000 loan in my name. The only reason I'm not drowning in debt right now is because the bank found it in my favor. And you're worried about your stress?" Melissa finally spoke, her voice tinged with frustration. "You're so dramatic, Scarlet. It's not like they did it to hurt you. They were just trying to make my wedding special. If you weren't so selfish, none of this would have happened." Scarlet let out a bitter laugh. "Selfish? Do you mean standing up for myself is selfish? Maybe it's time someone in this family learned what accountability looks like." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the coffee table. "This is everything: the loan documents, the bank's findings, and my lawyer's report. If you're still not clear on the damage you've done, take a good look." Her father glanced at the folder but made no move to pick it up. "What do you expect us to do, Scarlet? We can't undo what happened." Scarlet's voice was firm but controlled. "I don't expect you to undo it. But I expect you to take responsibility. That means paying back every cent of the loan, and Melissa, that includes you. This was your wedding, after all." Melissa's eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious. Kevin and I already have enough on our plate trying to figure out our next steps. We've postponed the wedding because of you." Scarlet's gaze didn't waver. "Good. Maybe postponing it will give you time to realize that weddings don't have to bankrupt people or ruin relationships." Her mother's voice trembled. "Scarlet, please. This family is falling apart. Don't you see what this is doing to us?" Scarlet's patience snapped. "What this is doing to us? No, Mom. What you did to me. You've spent your whole life catering to Melissa's every whim while expecting me to be the reliable one, the responsible one, the invisible one. Well, not anymore. If this family is falling apart, it's because you built it on the foundation of favoritism and manipulation." The room fell silent, her words hanging heavy in the air. For the first time, Scarlet saw a flicker of shame cross her parents' faces. Melissa, however, looked indignant, as though the idea of sharing responsibility was an affront. Scarlet stood, ready to leave. "I've said my piece. The ball is in your court now. Pay back the loan and stay out of my finances. And if you can't do that, then don't expect me to stick around. I'm done being the scapegoat for this family." As she turned to leave, her father's voice stopped her. "Scarlet, wait." She glanced back, seeing a rare softness in his expression. "You're right. We've made mistakes. I don't know if we can fix this, but I'll try." Her mother looked conflicted, but she nodded slowly. Melissa, on the other hand, crossed her arms and looked away. It wasn't the resolution Scarlet had hoped for, but it was a start. Leaving her parents' house, Scarlet felt a mix of emotions. Relief, anger, and an undercurrent of sadness. She knew this wasn't a neat, happy ending, but it was a turning point. For the first time, she had stood her ground and demanded respect. The road ahead would be difficult, but Scarlet was no longer afraid to walk it alone if she had to. The next day, Scarlet received a text from Kevin. "I'm sorry for everything," it read. "You did the right thing. Thank you for being honest, even when it was hard. It was a small validation, but it reminded Scarlet that truth and integrity mattered, even if they came at a cost. Scarlet channeled her energy into her work, using the betrayal and conflict as fuel for her creativity. Her designs gained a boldness and authenticity that resonated with her clients, and soon she began receiving offers to collaborate on larger projects. She took it as a sign to finally launch her design firm, a dream she had almost lost in the chaos. With her business thriving and her personal life regaining balance, Scarlet realized she didn't need her family's approval to find happiness. She had built a life that was hers, one defined by strength, resilience, and self-respect. And that, she decided, was worth far more than any wedding or loan ever could. In the weeks following the family confrontation, Scarlet began to rebuild her life with a newfound sense of freedom and clarity. Her parents made sporadic efforts to reach out, though their responses were tepid and tentative. Her father started making small payments toward the loan, a gesture that, while far from enough, signaled a glimmer of accountability. Her mother's calls, however, carried the same undertone of guilt and manipulation. Scarlet kept her boundaries firm, choosing to communicate only through her lawyer to avoid further emotional entanglements. Melissa, predictably, remained silent. Her sister's absence from Scarlet's life became a strange mix of relief and sadness. Though Scarlet had hoped Melissa might take some responsibility for her part in the ordeal, she realized it wasn't her job to force that realization. For now, peace meant distance. Meanwhile, Scarlet's career soared. Inspired by the chaos and transformation in her personal life, her work took on a raw honesty that clients and collaborators gravitated toward. She finalized plans to launch her design firm, aptly naming it Phoenix Studio to reflect her journey of rising from the ashes of betrayal and loss. With each new project, she felt the weight of her family's actions lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and pride in what she was creating for herself. One afternoon, Scarlet received an unexpected message from Kevin. "Hi Scarlet," it read. "I thought you'd like to know that Melissa and I have decided to call off the wedding. Your honesty made me realize some things I'd been ignoring. Thank you for speaking up, even when it wasn't easy." Scarlet stared at the screen, her emotions conflicting. She didn't wish ill on her sister, but she couldn't ignore the relief that came with knowing Melissa's impulsive choices had been reined in. She replied simply, "I hope you both find what you're looking for. Take care, Kevin." With her family drama no longer consuming her days, Scarlet turned her attention toward building new connections. She reached out to friends she'd neglected during the turmoil, meeting for coffee and sharing laughs that felt long overdue. One of those friends, a fellow designer named Mia, became a trusted sounding board and eventually a partner in Phoenix Studio. Together, they laid the groundwork for a business that emphasized collaboration, creativity, and resilience. Though Scarlet found herself thriving professionally, there were quiet nights when she reflected on the losses she'd endured. She missed the idea of family, the unconditional support she had always hoped her parents and sister might offer. But those moments of grief were tempered by the realization that she had created a new family of her own, one built on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or guilt. As the months passed, the financial repercussions of the forged loan slowly unraveled. Her parents managed to pay off a portion of the debt by selling an old property, though they refrained from acknowledging Scarlet's role in sparking their decision to take responsibility. Scarlet didn't press them for recognition. She had long since accepted that some apologies would never come. The final chapter of Scarlet's resolution came on a crisp autumn morning, a year after the bank's investigation cleared her name. She stood outside the building that housed Phoenix Studio, watching as the sign bearing the company's name was installed above the door. Mia stood beside her, grinning. "We did it," she said, nudging Scarlet's shoulder. Scarlet smiled, her chest swelling with pride. "We did." The studio's grand opening was a small but meaningful event. Friends, colleagues, and even a few clients from Scarlet's past attended, offering words of encouragement and admiration. As Scarlet mingled with the crowd, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every challenge, every heartbreak, had led her here. Toward the end of the evening, as the guests began to trickle out, Scarlet's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from her father. "We're proud of you, Scarlet. Your mother and I wish we could have been better. I hope one day you can forgive us." Scarlet read the message twice, her emotions swirling. She didn't respond right away, unsure of what to say. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't something she could offer easily. It would take time, perhaps more than her parents were willing to give. But for the first time, she felt a faint glimmer of hope that reconciliation might be possible on her terms. That night, Scarlet stood in her studio, the city lights twinkling through the large windows. She ran her fingers over the edge of her work table, a symbol of the life she had fought to reclaim. The pain of the past lingered, but it no longer defined her. Scarlet was no longer a victim of her family's betrayal. She was an architect of her future, a phoenix rising from the ashes. As she turned out the lights and locked the door, Scarlet felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She was ready for whatever came next. Scarlet's journey is a powerful reminder that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, it is possible to rise stronger and reclaim control of your life. She refused to let her family's choices define her, choosing instead to stand her ground and rebuild a future on her terms. Through resilience and determination, Scarlet found not just success, but also a deeper sense of self-worth and fulfillment. Her story raises an important question for all of us: how do we set boundaries and demand respect, even from those we love? Scarlet's courage shows us that prioritizing our well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. What would you do in Scarlet's shoes? Would you have taken legal action, or handled things differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found Scarlet's story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of resilience, courage, and transformation. Join us next time for another story that proves no matter how dark the moment, there's always a way forward.